The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of Riverside High School as 17-year-old Damon Wright stepped out of his mom's car. He adjusted his backpack straps and took a deep breath, trying to calm the butterflies dancing in his stomach. Moving to a new school halfway through junior year wasn't exactly his idea of fun, but his dad's job transfer had left the family with no choice. "You'll do great, honey," his mother called through the open car window. "Remember what your uncle always says about new challenges?" Damon nodded and managed a small smile. His uncle Rico had taught him many things over the years, especially during those long hours at the gym. One lesson stuck with him more than others. Stay calm, stay focused, and let your actions speak louder than words. As his mom drove away, Damon looked up at the brick building in front of him. Riverside High was much bigger than his old school back in Detroit. Students were already streaming through the front doors, chatting loudly about weekend plans and upcoming tests. He noticed something immediately that made his chest tighten a bit. Almost everyone he could see was white. Back home, his school had been much more diverse, and he'd never really thought about being one of the few black kids in a place. Here, he definitely stood out. The main office was buzzing with activity when he walked in. A kind-looking woman behind the counter smiled at him warmly. "You must be Damon Wright," she said, shuffling through some papers. "Welcome to Riverside High. I'm Mrs. Patterson, the office manager. Here's your schedule and a map of the school. Your first class is AP History with Mr. Thompson in room 204. Damon thanked her and studied the map. The hallways seemed like a maze, but he figured he'd learn his way around soon enough. The bell rang and suddenly the corridors filled with students rushing to their first period classes. Finding room 204 took longer than expected. By the time Damon knocked on the door, class had already started. Mr. Thompson, a tall man with graying hair, paused his lecture about World War II to welcome the new student. "Class, we have a new member joining us today. This is Damon Wright. Damon, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?" All eyes turned to him, and Damon felt his palms get a little sweaty. He wasn't used to being the center of attention like this. Hi everyone. I just moved here from Detroit. My dad got transferred for work. I like reading, working out, and, well, I guess I'll figure out what else this place has to offer." A few students nodded politely, but Damon caught some whispered conversations and sideways glances. He took an empty seat near the back and tried to focus on the lesson about military strategies, though he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. During lunch, Damon sat alone at a corner table with a sandwich his mom had packed. He pulled out a book about Bruce Lee that he'd been reading, hoping to blend into the background. The cafeteria was loud and crowded, with different groups clearly sticking to their own areas. The athletes sat together near the windows, the theater kids claimed a section by the stage, and various other groups had carved out their own territories. That's when he first noticed them. A group of guys at a nearby table kept looking over at him and talking in low voices. One of them, a stocky kid with bleached hair, seemed to be the leader of the group. Damon caught bits of their conversation. "New guy over there. Where do you think he's from? Probably thinks he's tough." Damon tried to ignore them and focused on his book. Uncle Rico had always told him that some people would judge him before they even knew him, and the best thing to do was prove them wrong through his actions, not his words. After lunch, things got a little more direct. As Damon walked to his chemistry class, the same group of guys happened to be walking behind him. He heard one of them say, loud enough for him to hear, "Man, I bet this guy's never seen a chemistry lab before. Probably thinks we're going to cook something illegal in there." His friends laughed, and Damon felt his jaw clench. He'd been taking advanced chemistry since sophomore year and had always been good at science. But he kept walking, remembering another one of Uncle Rico's lessons. Don't let people bait you into becoming someone you're not. Chemistry class went better. Mrs. Rodriguez was enthusiastic about her subject, and when she asked questions about molecular structures, Damon found himself raising his hand and answering correctly several times. He noticed some surprised looks from other students, including a couple from that same group of guys who'd been making comments. The rest of the day passed quietly. Damon learned his way around the school, figured out which teachers seemed cool and which ones looked like they might be strict, and tried to get a feel for the social landscape. He noticed that the group from lunch wasn't just any random bunch of guys. They seemed popular, with other students either trying to get their attention or staying out of their way. In his last class of the day, English literature, the teacher asked students to share what they'd read over the weekend. When it was Damon's turn, he mentioned that he'd finished reading the autobiography of Malcolm X. "Interesting choice," Mr. Davis said. "What did you think of Malcolm's transformation throughout the book?" Damon thought for a moment. "I think it showed how people can change when they're willing to look at themselves honestly. He went from being angry at everyone to understanding that real change comes from education and bringing people together, not pushing them apart." The classroom was quiet for a moment. Damon noticed some students looking impressed, while others seemed uncomfortable with the discussion. After the final bell rang, Damon headed to his locker to grab his books for homework. The hallways were crowded with students rushing to catch buses or meet friends. As he closed his locker, he found himself face to face with the stocky kid from lunch, along with two of his friends. "Hey, new guy," the kid said, not exactly friendly but not openly hostile either. "I'm Tyler. This is Josh and Kevin." "Damon," he replied, staying relaxed but alert. "So Detroit, huh?" Tyler continued. "That's a rough city. You must be pretty tough coming from there." There was something in Tyler's tone that made Damon careful about his response. "It's like any city. Some parts are rough, some parts are nice. Depends where you spend your time." Josh smirked. "Yeah, I bet. Probably had to learn how to fight just to survive, right?" Damon shrugged. "I learned that avoiding fights is usually smarter than starting them." The three boys exchanged glances and Tyler stepped a little closer. "Well, things are different here. We keep things peaceful, if you know what I mean. As long as everyone knows their place." The words hung in the air for a moment. Damon understood exactly what Tyler meant, but he wasn't about to give him the reaction he was looking for. "Sounds good to me," Damon said calmly. "I'm just here to finish school and graduate." He walked away without looking back, but he could feel their eyes on him. As he pushed through the front doors of the school, Damon realized that his first day at Riverside High was just the beginning. These guys were testing him, trying to figure out how he'd respond to pressure. What they didn't know was that he'd been training for situations like this his whole life, just not in the way they might expect. 3 weeks had passed since Damon's first day at Riverside High, and what started as subtle comments had slowly turned into something more deliberate. Tyler and his crew seemed to have made Damon their new project, though they were careful to keep things just under the radar of teachers and administrators. It began small. Damon would find his locker slightly ajar when he was sure he'd closed it properly. His textbooks would mysteriously end up on the floor during passing periods. In the cafeteria, Tyler's group would suddenly get very quiet when Damon walked by their table, then burst into laughter once he passed, making sure he heard them. "Dude, did you see how he walks?" Kevin would say, loud enough for Damon to hear. "Like he's trying to look tough or something." "Yeah," Josh would add. "Probably thinks he's in some rap video." Damon had dealt with ignorant comments before, but there was something different about the way these guys operated. They were smart about it, never crossing obvious lines when adults were around. They'd perfected the art of making someone feel uncomfortable while maintaining plausible deniability. During PE class, Coach Williams had them playing basketball. Damon had always been decent at the game, though it wasn't his main focus like martial arts had been. When Tyler's team was picked to play against Damon's, the real game began. "Hope you can actually play," Tyler said as they lined up for the tip-off. "Wouldn't want to embarrass yourself in front of everyone." The game was rough. Tyler and his friends played aggressive defense against Damon specifically, fouling him hard but making it look accidental. When Damon scored a nice layup, Tyler shoved him a little harder than necessary during the next play. "My bad," Tyler said with a fake smile. "Guess I don't know my own strength." Coach Williams was busy dealing with other students and didn't notice the extra contact. Damon bit his tongue and kept playing, but he could feel his frustration building. After PE, while changing in the locker room, the comments got more personal. "Hey Damon," Josh called out. "You ever think about trying out for the track team? I bet you'd be real fast." The way he said it made the underlying meaning clear to everyone in the room. Some kids looked uncomfortable. evenly pulling his shirt over his head. Really? Tyler joined in. I would have thought you'd be natural at it. You know, with all the practice your people get. The locker room went quiet. Even the guys who usually minded their own business stopped what they were doing. Damon felt his hands ball into fists automatically, a reflex he'd developed from years of training. But Uncle Rico's voice echoed in his head. The strongest fighters know when not to fight. Damon took a slow breath and looked Tyler directly in the eyes. I'm not sure what you mean by my people, but if you're talking about students who actually care about graduating, then yeah, I guess I am one of them. He finished packing his bag and walked out, leaving Tyler looking frustrated that he hadn't gotten the reaction he wanted. The pattern continued over the following days. In American history, when they were discussing the civil rights movement, Tyler would make comments like, "This must be really interesting for you, Damon. Like, personal, you know?" In chemistry, when they were working with lab partners, Tyler somehow always ended up near Damon's station. "Be careful with those chemicals," he'd say. "Wouldn't want anything to explode." The worst part wasn't just Tyler and his core group. Other students were starting to treat Damon differently, too. Some seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the situation but didn't know how to help. Others appeared to be enjoying the drama from a distance. A few started avoiding Damon altogether, as if being associated with him might make them targets, too. Damon tried to focus on his schoolwork, but his grades were starting to slip. It was hard to concentrate on algebra when he was constantly wondering what Tyler's group would try next. He'd catch himself looking over his shoulder in the hallways and checking his locker multiple times to make sure nothing had been messed with. One afternoon, Damon was sitting in the library trying to study for a biology test when Tyler and Kevin walked over to his table. They sat down without being invited, spreading their books out like they owned the place. "Mind if we join you?" Tyler asked, not waiting for an answer. "We're having trouble with this chapter about evolution." Damon looked up from his notes. "There are other tables." "Yeah, but you seem really smart," Kevin said, his tone mocking. "We thought maybe you could help us understand how some species adapt to new environments while others just don't survive." The librarian was at the other end of the room helping some sophomore girls with a research project. Tyler leaned across the table, lowering his voice. "See, what I don't get is how some animals think they can just waltz into a new territory and expect to be welcomed. Don't they understand there's already an established ecosystem?" Damon closed his book and looked at both of them. "Actually, most successful species adapt by finding their own niche. They don't try to take over or cause problems. They just focus on surviving and thriving in their own space." "Interesting," Tyler said, leaning back in his chair. "But what happens when the new species starts attracting attention from the locals? When it starts making the other animals uncomfortable?" "Usually," Damon replied, keeping his voice steady. "The smart animals realize that diversity makes an ecosystem stronger. The ignorant ones waste their energy on pointless territorial behavior and end up weakening the whole environment." Kevin snorted. "Sounds like someone's been reading too many textbooks and not enough about real life." "Real life," Damon said, standing up to leave, "teaches you that the loudest animals in the forest are usually the most insecure." As he walked away, he heard Tyler mutter something to Kevin, followed by quiet laughter. Damon felt his jaw clench, but he kept walking. That evening at dinner, his mom noticed he wasn't eating much. "Everything okay at school, honey?" she asked. "You've seemed a little stressed lately." Damon considered telling her what was happening, but he knew she'd want to call the school, and that would probably make things worse. Tyler and his friends were too smart to leave obvious evidence of what they were doing. "Just adjusting to the new place," he said. "It's different from Detroit." His dad looked up from his plate. "Different how?" "Just different social dynamics, I guess. Still figuring it out." That night, Damon lay in bed staring at the ceiling thinking about Uncle Rico's gym back home. He missed the familiar sounds of heavy bags being hit, the smell of sweat and determination, the feeling of being around people who understood discipline and respect. Here he felt like he was constantly walking through a minefield, trying to avoid setting off explosives he couldn't even see. His phone buzzed with a text from his best friend Carlos back in Detroit. "How's the new school? Making friends?" Damon stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Still settling in. Different crowd here." He didn't mention Tyler or the daily comments or the way some students looked at him like he was an unwelcome visitor in their territory. He didn't talk about how he was starting to dread going to school each morning or how he'd begun eating lunch in empty classrooms to avoid the cafeteria. What Tyler and his friends didn't realize was that their constant pressure was teaching Damon something important about himself. Every day that he chose not to react, every moment that he kept his composure despite their attempts to provoke him, he was building mental strength that went beyond anything he'd learned in the gym. But even the strongest people have limits, and Damon could feel himself getting closer to his. The October air was crisp as Damon walked across the parking lot after school, his backpack heavy with textbooks and the weight of another difficult day. 6 weeks at Riverside High had felt like 6 months. Tyler's campaign of harassment had gotten more creative and more public, while still staying just under the line that would get the attention of school authorities. Today had been particularly rough. During lunch, Tyler's group had started a conversation at the next table about urban culture and how some people don't know how to act in civilized places. When Damon got up to throw away his trash, Tyler had loudly commented, "Hope he doesn't steal anything on his way to the garbage can." The comment was meant to sound like a joke, but the racist undertone was crystal clear to everyone within earshot. A few students looked uncomfortable, but as usual, nobody said anything. Damon had simply thrown away his lunch and walked out of the cafeteria, his appetite completely gone. Now, heading toward the student parking lot where his mom would pick him up, Damon just wanted to get through another day without incident. He pulled out his phone to text her that he was ready, but before he could type anything, he heard familiar voices behind him. "Yo, Detroit." Damon turned to see Tyler approaching with Josh, Kevin, and 2 other guys from their circle. They were walking with the kind of swagger that meant they felt like they had backup and weren't worried about consequences. "We need to talk," Tyler said, stopping about 10 feet away. "About what?" Damon replied, sliding his phone into his pocket but keeping his hands visible and relaxed. "About your attitude problem," Josh jumped in. "You think you're better than everyone here." Damon looked around the parking lot. There were other students nearby, some getting into cars, others waiting for rides. A few had already noticed the confrontation and were watching, some even pulling out their phones. "I don't have an attitude problem," Damon said calmly. "I'm just trying to get through school like everyone else." "See, that's exactly what I'm talking about," Tyler said, stepping closer. "Acting all innocent like you don't know what you're doing, like you don't know you don't belong here." "I have as much right to be here as anyone," Damon replied, his voice still controlled but with an edge creeping in. Kevin laughed. "Right, based on what?" "This is our school, our town. You're just some outsider who thinks he can walk in here and change things." More students had gathered now, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. Damon could see phones being held up, recording. He knew this was exactly what Tyler wanted, a public scene where Damon would either back down and look weak or react and look like the aggressor. "I'm not trying to change anything," Damon said. "I just want to go to class, do my work, and graduate." "Bullshit," Tyler said, taking another step forward. "You walk around here like you own the place, acting all smart in class, showing off for the teachers. Since when is doing well in school a bad thing?" "Since you started making the rest of us look bad," Josh added. "Always raising your hand, always having the right answers. Like you're trying to prove some point." Damon felt his patience wearing thin. 6 weeks of constant harassment, subtle racism, and social isolation were taking their toll. "The only point I'm trying to prove is that I can handle the same coursework as everyone else." "Handle it?" Tyler scoffed. "You mean like how your people handled Detroit? Turned it into a wasteland?" The words hit Damon like a physical blow. He'd heard plenty of ignorant comments about his hometown, but coming from Tyler in front of all these people, it felt like a line had been crossed. "You don't know anything about Detroit," Damon said, his voice dropping lower. "And you definitely don't know anything about me." "I know enough," Tyler replied, emboldened by the crowd and his friends' support. "I know your type. Come into a place like this, act all peaceful and respectful, but you're just waiting for your chance to cause trouble. The only trouble I see is coming from you and your friends." Tyler's face flushed red. "My friends? We're not the prob. Lem here, Detroit. We're just trying to protect our school from people who don't understand how things work around here." "And how do things work around here?" Damon asked, genuinely curious about how Tyler would explain himself in front of all these witnesses. "Simple," Tyler said, spreading his arms wide. "People like you need to learn to stay in your lane. Stop trying to fit in where you don't belong." The crowd had grown larger now, Damon could see at least 30 students watching, all with their phones out. Some looked uncomfortable with Tyler's increasingly obvious racism, but still nobody was stepping in to help. "And what if I don't want to stay in whatever lane you think I belong in?" Damon asked. Tyler smiled coldly. "Then maybe someone needs to teach you." He shoved Damon hard in the chest, hard enough to make him stumble backward a step. The crowd gasped and moved closer, sensing that things were about to escalate. "Tyler, don't," one of the watching students called out, but her voice was drowned out by others encouraging the confrontation. Damon regained his balance and looked Tyler in the eye. "You really don't want to do this? What are you going to do about it?" Tyler asked, shoving him again, harder this time. For 6 weeks, Damon had absorbed every insult, every racist joke, every attempt to make him feel unwelcome. He'd practiced the breathing techniques Uncle Rico had taught him, repeated the mantras about staying calm and choosing his battles wisely. He'd remembered every lesson about discipline and self-control. But everyone has a breaking point. When Tyler raised his hand for a third shove, Damon's training took over, not his martial arts training, but his conflict resolution skills. "Stop," he said firmly, raising his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "This doesn't have to happen. We can just walk away." "Walk away?" Tyler laughed. "Like a coward?" "I don't think so." That's when Tyler crossed the line that Damon couldn't ignore. He threw a wild punch aimed at Damon's face. In that split second, 6 weeks of harassment, years of martial arts training, and pure instinct all came together. Damon didn't think, he just reacted. He stepped slightly to the side, letting Tyler's punch slip past his shoulder. In one fluid motion, he caught Tyler's extended arm, used his momentum against him, and executed a perfect hip throw that sent Tyler spinning through the air before landing hard on his back on the asphalt. The entire sequence took maybe 3 seconds. The parking lot went completely silent except for the sound of Tyler gasping for air, having had the wind knocked out of him. He wasn't hurt, just stunned and embarrassed. Josh and Kevin started to move forward, but something in Damon's stance made them hesitate. "Anyone else?" Damon asked quietly, not moving from his balanced position. Nobody answered. Tyler slowly got to his feet, his face red from embarrassment and anger, but he didn't make another move. The circle of students began to back away, suddenly realizing they'd been watching something much more serious than a typical school fight. Damon picked up his backpack, which had fallen during the confrontation. His hands were steady, his breathing was controlled, and his voice was calm when he spoke. "I tried to avoid this," he said, looking around at the crowd. "I've been trying to avoid this for 6 weeks. All I wanted was to go to school in peace." He started walking toward the street where his mom would be waiting, but turned back for one final comment. "Tyler, next time you want to teach someone a lesson, make sure you're qualified to be the teacher." As Damon walked away, he could hear the excited chatter starting up behind him, students already uploading videos and calling friends to tell them what had happened. He knew his life at Riverside High was about to change dramatically, but he wasn't sure if it would be for better or worse. What he didn't know was that those phone videos would tell a more complete story than anyone expected, and that story was about to spread far beyond the parking lot of Riverside High. By the time Damon got home that evening, his phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. The parking lot incident had exploded across social media, but the story being told wasn't exactly the one he'd lived through. The first video to go viral showed only the final 30 seconds of the confrontation. It started right when Tyler threw his punch and ended with him on the ground, making it look like Damon had attacked an innocent student without provocation. The caption read, "New kid shows his true colors. This is what happens when you bring Detroit to the suburbs." Within hours, the video had thousands of views and hundreds of comments, most of them supporting Tyler and calling Damon a violent thug. Parents were sharing it in community Facebook groups, demanding that the dangerous student be expelled immediately. Damon's mom found him in his room, staring at his laptop screen with a mixture of anger and despair. "Honey, what happened today?" she asked, sitting on the edge of his bed. Mrs. Patterson from the school called. She said there was some kind of incident. Damon showed her the viral video and explained what had really happened, starting with Tyler's harassment campaign that had been building for weeks. His mother listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "Why didn't you tell us this was happening?" she asked. "Because I thought I could handle it. And because I knew if I told you, you'd want to get involved, and that would just make things worse." His father appeared in the doorway. "Son, your principal wants to meet with us first thing tomorrow morning. He's talking about suspension, possibly expulsion." The next morning at Riverside High felt like walking into a war zone. News vans were parked outside the school and reporters were interviewing students and parents. Inside, the hallways buzzed with tension. Some students stared at Damon as he walked by, while others actively avoided making eye contact. Principal Morrison's office was packed. Tyler's parents were there, along with the school superintendent and a woman Damon didn't recognize who turned out to be the district's legal advisor. "Mr. and Mrs. Wright," Principal Morrison began, "we take violence very seriously at this school. The video evidence clearly shows your son attacking another student. The video evidence shows my son defending himself," Damon's father replied firmly, and according to what Damon told us, this was the culmination of weeks of harassment that apparently went unnoticed by school administration. Tyler's mother spoke up, her voice shaking with emotion. "My son has never been in trouble before. He's an honor student, captain of the tennis team. This new boy obviously has anger issues." "Tyler threw the first punch," Damon said quietly. "I was trying to walk away." "The video doesn't show that," the superintendent interjected. "What it shows is you using what appears to be professional fighting techniques against another student." That's when things took an unexpected turn. There was a knock on the office door and Mrs. Patterson entered with a stack of papers and a tablet. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I think you all need to see something." She connected the tablet to the room's smartboard and pulled up a longer video. "This was sent to me this morning by 3 different students. They wanted to make sure you saw the whole story." The video started 5 minutes before Tyler's punch, showing him and his friends surrounding Damon, making their comments about staying in your lane and people like you. It captured Tyler's racist remarks about Detroit, his repeated shoves, and most importantly, Damon's multiple attempts to de-escalate the situation. The room fell silent as they watched Damon try to walk away, offer to end the confrontation peacefully, and only react physically when Tyler threw the first punch. Even then, the video showed remarkable restraint. Damon's defensive move was clean, controlled, and designed to stop the attack without causing unnecessary harm. "There's more," Mrs. Patterson continued. She pulled up screenshots of social media posts going back weeks, showing Tyler and his friends making racist jokes and memes, some specifically targeting Damon. Students had been screenshotting and saving them, building a digital trail of harassment. Tyler's parents looked stunned. His father turned to his son, his voice tight with anger. "Tyler, is this true? Have you been harassing this boy?" Tyler looked down at his hands, unable to meet his father's eyes. "It wasn't harassment. We were just messing around," Damon's mother said, her voice rising. "Making racist jokes about my son's hometown is messing around? Pushing him and telling him he doesn't belong here is messing around?" Principal Morrison cleared his throat. "This certainly changes the context of yesterday's incident. Mrs. Patterson, how many students have come forward with information?" 17 so far," she replied. "Many of them say they witnessed ongoing harassment but didn't know how to report it. Some were afraid of becoming targets themselves." The legal advisor leaned forward. "Mr. Morrison, given this new evidence, I'd strongly recommend conducting a full investigation before taking any disciplinary action against Mr. Wright. In fact, we may be looking at a civil rights violation case here." Tyler's mother stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're going to take the word of students with cell phone videos over our son?" "Mom, stop," Tyler said quietly. "Just stop." Everyone turned to look at him. His face was red and he looked like he wanted to disappear. "They're right," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I did harass him. We all did. And yesterday I threw the first punch. He was trying to walk away and I wouldn't let him." The admission hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Tyler's parents looked devastated while Damon's family sat in stunned silence. "Why?" Principal Morrison asked. "Tyler, you're a good student with no history of behavioral problems. Why would you target Damon like this?" Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. I guess when he first got here, he seemed different. Smart, confident. Some of my friends started making jokes, and instead of telling them to stop, I joined in. Then it became this thing, like we were all trying to prove something." "Prove what?" the superintendent asked. "That this was still our school, that we were still in charge." Tyler looked directly at Damon for the first time. "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm really sorry. Over the next hour, the full scope of what had been happening at Riverside High became clear. The investigation revealed that Tyler's group had been systematically harassing not just Damon, but other students they considered outsiders or different. The difference was that Damon was the first one who'd been pushed far enough to defend himself, and the first one whose incident had been caught on video. As the meeting wrapped up, Principal Morrison announced his decisions. Tyler would face a 2-week suspension and mandatory counseling. His friends would receive varying levels of discipline based on their involvement. Most importantly, the school would implement new anti-bullying policies and cultural sensitivity training for all students and staff. "What about the video that's gone viral?" Damon's father asked. "My son's reputation has been destroyed by lies." "We'll be issuing a public statement today," the superintendent replied, "and we'll be sharing the complete video evidence with local media to set the record straight." As they left the office, Tyler caught up with Damon in the hallway. "Damon, wait." Damon turned around, not sure what to expect. "I know my apology doesn't mean much after what I put you through," Tyler said, "but I want you to know that I learned something about myself these past few weeks, and I don't like what I learned." "What's that?" "That I was so worried about you changing our school that I became someone I don't recognize. Someone my parents didn't raise me to be." Damon studied Tyler's face, looking for signs of sincerity. "Why should I believe you're really sorry and not just sorry you got caught?" "Because," Tyler said, "getting caught was the best thing that could have happened to me. I needed someone to hold up a mirror and show me who I was becoming." That afternoon, the complete story hit the local news. The longer video went viral, replacing the edited version that had painted Damon as the aggressor. Comment sections that had been filled with racist attacks began shifting as people saw the full context of what had happened. But the most surprising development came 3 days later, when Tyler posted a video of his own on social media. In it, he took full responsibility for his actions, apologized publicly to Damon, and urged other students to speak up when they witnessed bullying or harassment. "I spent 6 weeks trying to make someone else feel small because I was scared of what his presence at our school might mean," Tyler said in the video. "But the only thing that changed was me, and not for the better." Real strength isn't about putting people down or making them feel unwelcome. Real strength is admitting when you're wrong and trying to do better. The video didn't fix everything overnight, but it started conversations that Riverside High desperately needed to have. And for the first time since arriving at his new school, Damon began to think that maybe, just maybe, things might actually get better. 3 months after the parking lot incident, Riverside High looked very different to Damon. Not physically, but in ways that mattered more than paint on walls or new lockers. The change had started small, with individual students reaching out to him, but had grown into something that surprised everyone, including Damon himself. It began with Ashley Chen, a quiet sophomore who had witnessed several of Tyler's harassment incidents but hadn't known how to help. The day after Tyler's public apology video, she approached Damon at lunch. "I'm sorry I never said anything before," she told him, nervously fidgeting with her lunch tray. "I wanted to help, but I was scared I'd become a target too." "You don't need to apologize," Damon replied. "I understand why people stayed quiet." "But that's exactly the problem," Ashley said, sitting down across from him. "When good people stay quiet, bad things keep happening." That conversation led to Ashley organizing a student forum called Voices, where students could share their experiences with bullying, discrimination, or feeling like outsiders. Damon was reluctant to participate at first, but Ashley convinced him that his story might help other students who were dealing with similar situations. The first Voices meeting had 12 students. By the third meeting, they had over 50, including some surprising attendees. Josh, one of Tyler's former friends, showed up to talk about how peer pressure had led him to participate in things he knew were wrong. Christina Valdez, a senior who was undocumented, shared her story about living in constant fear that someone would report her family to immigration authorities. "The weird thing," she told the group, "was that I was so worried about fitting in and not drawing attention to myself that I never stood up for other people who were being mistreated. I thought if I kept my head down and stayed invisible, I'd be safe." Principal Morrison started attending the meetings too, not to monitor or control them, but to listen and learn. "I've been an educator for 25 years, he admitted to the group one afternoon, "and I'm embarrassed to say that I missed a lot of what was happening in my own hallways." These conversations are teaching me how to be a better principal. The most significant change came when Mrs. Rodriguez, the chemistry teacher, approached Damon with an idea. "I've been thinking about your situation," she said after class one day, "and it occurred to me that you handled those weeks of harassment with incredible discipline and self-control. That kind of mental strength doesn't come from nowhere." She was right. When Damon finally opened up about his martial arts background, explaining the years of training with Uncle Rico and the philosophy behind the discipline, it sparked something unexpected. "Would you be interested in starting an after-school program?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked. "Not fight training, but the mental and philosophical aspects of martial arts. Discipline, conflict resolution, building confidence." Damon wasn't sure at first. The last thing he wanted was for people to think he was promoting violence or trying to teach other students how to fight. But Mrs. Rodriguez had a different vision. "What if we called it inner strength?" she suggested. "Focus on meditation, breathing techniques, self-discipline, and nonviolent conflict resolution. The physical aspects would be secondary to the mental training." The program launched 6 weeks later in the school gym after regular hours. Damon had expected maybe 10 or 15 students to show up. Instead, 37 students came to the first session, including some faces that surprised him. Tyler was there. "I know I probably don't have the right to be here," he said after the first session, "but I think I need what you're teaching more than anyone." Over the following weeks, Tyler proved he was serious about changing. He participated fully in every exercise, asked thoughtful questions, and even helped demonstrate conflict de-escalation techniques for newer students. The transformation wasn't instant, but it was genuine. "I spent so much energy trying to make you feel weak," Tyler told Damon one evening as they cleaned up the gym. "But you were stronger than anyone I knew. You just showed it differently than I expected." "Strength isn't about dominating other people," Damon replied, stacking meditation mats in the storage closet. "It's about having control over yourself, especially when everything around you is chaotic." The program grew beyond what anyone had imagined. Students started using the breathing techniques during stressful tests. Others applied the conflict resolution skills to family arguments or friend drama. Ashley Chen used the confidence-building exercises to finally audition for the school play, something she'd been afraid to try for 3 years. The most powerful moment came during a session focused on empathy and understanding different perspectives. Damon had the students pair up and share a time when they felt judged or misunderstood based on their appearance, background, or circumstances. "I want you to really listen to your partner," he told them. "Don't think about what you're going to say next. Just hear their story." Christina Valdez was paired with Brady Johnson, a football player whose family had moved to Riverside from rural Montana. As they shared their experiences, they realized they had more in common than they'd expected. "I never thought about how hard it must be to feel like you don't belong because of where you came from," Brady told the group. "I mean, I felt weird about being the country kid in a suburban school, but that's nothing compared to worrying about your family's safety. And I never considered that someone who seemed to fit in perfectly might also feel like an outsider sometimes," Christina replied. These conversations started happening outside the program too. Students who had never spoken before were finding connections. The school's social landscape was slowly shifting from rigid cliques to more fluid, inclusive groups. The changes even reached the teaching staff. Mr. Thompson, the history teacher, redesigned his civil rights unit to include more interactive discussions about current social issues. Mrs. Davis in English literature added more diverse authors to her reading list and encouraged students to write personal essays about their own experiences with identity and belonging. Not everything changed overnight, and not everyone embraced the new atmosphere. Some parents complained that the school was becoming too political or focusing too much on social justice nonsense. A few students continued to make inappropriate comments or jokes, though they found themselves increasingly isolated as their classmates began calling out such behavior. But for Damon, the most meaningful change was personal. 6 months earlier, he had dreaded walking through the school doors each morning. Now he looked forward to it. He had genuine friendships, teachers who respected him, and the satisfaction of knowing he was helping other students navigate their own challenges. The breakthrough moment came during the spring semester when Damon was approached by colleges, interested in both his academic achievements and his leadership in creating positive change at Riverside High. The guidance counselor, Mrs. Williams, called him to her office with a stack of recruitment letters. Universities love students who can succeed academically while also making their communities better, she explained. Your grades are excellent, but your leadership in the inner strength program and your role in promoting inclusion at our school make you stand out from other applicants. One letter particularly caught his attention. It was from the University of Michigan, offering him a full scholarship to study education with a focus on conflict resolution and community building. They want me to help develop programs that could be implemented in other schools, Damon told his parents that evening. Basically, they want me to take what we learned here and teach it to future educators. His mother wiped away tears. Your Uncle Rico would be so proud. He always said the strongest fighters are the ones who help others become strong too. As graduation approached, Damon reflected on how drastically his life had changed. The shy, nervous kid who had walked into Riverside High hoping to just blend in had become someone who stood up in front of assemblies, led workshops for parents and teachers, and mentored younger students dealing with their own social challenges. The night before graduation, Tyler approached him one final time. I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again, Tyler said. Thank you for not giving up on this place even when we gave you every reason to. Thank you for being willing to change, Damon replied. That took more courage than anything I did. I've been thinking about that, Tyler said. What you did in the parking lot that day wasn't really about fighting. It was about refusing to let someone else define who you were. During the graduation ceremony, when Principal Morrison called Damon's name to receive the Community Leadership Award, the entire auditorium stood and applauded. In the audience, his parents beamed with pride. But Damon's thoughts went to Uncle Rico and all the lessons about inner strength that had carried him through his most difficult moments. As he looked out at his classmates, many of whom had become genuine friends, Damon realized that his story at Riverside High wasn't really about martial arts, or even about standing up to bullies. It was about the power of staying true to your principles when everything around you is pushing you to compromise them. And sometimes, when you refuse to let others make you smaller, you end up making everyone around you bigger too. The shy kid from Detroit who had just wanted to graduate quietly had accidentally taught an entire school community what real strength looked like, and that lesson would continue long after he walked across the stage to receive his diploma.